Hello, everyone, and welcome to Granite School District's and Utah Parent Center's IEP Q&A. We've put this little group together of our director, Bryce Day, our associate directors for elementary school, who's Kyle Anderson and Sheri Kennedy. And we've put together a list of questions from a survey submitted to parents with general questions about COVID and IEP students. So we're hoping that these will answer your questions about some things that have been very concerning to a lot of parents. Not every question that was asked is going to be able to be answered right now. And a lot of that could be because these questions are specific to each school, or the answers are going to be specific to each school. So if by the end of this session, your questions have not been answered, reach out to your schools, to your IEP teams, and ask those questions. You also can call the district office, which off the top of my head, I'm not sure what the number is for the SPED department, so we can supply that to you. And you also can call the Utah Parent Center and ask me any questions, and I can help you get them answered. And my direct the number to the Parent Center is 801-272-1051, or you can call my cell phone, which is 801-833-3825. So let's turn the time over to our director and our associate directors and have some of our questions answered. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, guys.
Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for that great introduction. My name is Bryce Day. I'm the Director of Special Education for Granite School District. I'm new to Granite School District. Before this, I was up in Box Elder as Director of Special Education up there. I've been a kindergarten teacher. I've been a self-contained teacher. I've taught in elementary schools. Of course, that was my favorite, but I also taught in middle school as well before becoming an administrator and a principal. So I'm very excited for this opportunity to speak to you about some of the concerns that we all have regarding return to school, because right now, to be very honest, we're all scared. We don't know what this is going to be like, and we've never done this before. So it's new for all of us. If you haven't met Sheri Kennedy, I want to introduce Sheri Kennedy. Maybe Sheri can tell a little bit about herself, and then we'll move on to Kyle, and then we will just kind of launch into things. How does that sound? Okay.
Yeah, that sounds
Sheri?
great. Yeah, so my name is Sheri Kennedy. I've been an associate director for elementary for 7 years here in Granite. Prior to that, I've been an elementary school teacher. I taught resource. I was an assistant principal, and now I'm an associate director here at Granite. And I feel very, very fortunate to work with the Utah Parent Center and all of you families out there. We have a great relationship and are able to collaborate on a lot of great things. So I'm very happy to be here and answer questions.
I'm Kyle Anderson. I started out as a paraeducator in a self-contained classroom. I was a resource teacher. I've been an assistant principal in secondary, and most recently I was the principal at Rosecrest Elementary. So I'm new to the special ed department, but I'm really excited. I've enjoyed the couple of months I've been here and learned a lot. So thanks to the Parent Center for letting me participate and be a part of this.
Well, thanks both of you. It's wonderful to have you all here. And this is a nice introduction for especially Kyle and Bryce, who are new to us. So this is a great way to get everyone acquainted with you. So thanks, guys. And Sheri, of course. But we all know Sheri. She's great. She's been around for a while.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's start. Let's talk some general safety in schools right now, because that's the big fear, right? There's what do we do with our kids? How do we keep our kids safe? We've got faculty members who are worried about how do they keep themselves safe? How do we keep kids from contaminating teachers? How do we keep teachers from contaminating kids? So let's talk just a little bit about that. I think our first and best option for safety starts with kind of mitigation and starts with some screening. Now, Granite School District is not going to be doing symptom screening on a mass scale for all students. We are going to leave that up to parents. So that's where we want parents to be kind of familiar with what these coronavirus symptoms are, so that you know, you can talk to your kids, you can screen them a little bit before you send them off to school. So I've got this big old honkin' stack of papers here. This is the COVID school response manual put out by the Utah Department of Health. And the symptoms that we're looking for when it comes to COVID-19 and what we want you to be thinking about or kind of monitoring your kids for is a decrease in the sense of smell or taste. That is very common. Muscle aches or pain. So if you've got a student who's kind of complaining about those, shortness of breath, cough. If your child normally has a cough because of allergies, asthma, is this cough different? Is what they're looking for. Is it a different kind of cough? Did your child have a sore throat? And then of course, did your child have a temperature of 100.4 or higher? So what we're asking is if any of these applied to you or your child, then we ask that you make that wise choice and not send your student to school, because we don't want your child to be exposed or anybody else to be exposed. And just like we don't want your child to be exposed from somebody else who's choosing to send their child to school. Now, if the answer to any of those symptoms is yes, I've got a fever of 100.5, or I've got a cough and it's different than it was before, then you need to consider, you know, has your child been in close contact with anybody who's tested positive for COVID-19 in the last 14 days? This means that he or she has been within 6 feet or 2 meters, or about 2 arms lengths, if you want to go that way, for longer than about 15 minutes. If the answer to that is yes, then you might have contracted it, and you probably ought to quarantine yourselves and go get tested. So we're asking that be kind of a parent responsibility. Screen your child, make sure that when you're sending them to school that they are symptom free, because those are, you know, a big piece of it. Now, that being said, we all know stories, and we can talk about, you know, those who are asymptomatic, who might have only had one symptom and they didn't even realize it was a symptom, right? They didn't even realize that they had COVID-19 until they were tested for whatever reason. So in that case, our best option are face masks. That's the medicine we've got right now until we get a vaccination. Now, the face mask will not keep your child from contracting COVID-19, but what it will do is it will keep possible contamination of your child to somebody else. So it's really kind of a respect thing. So I wear my mask, right, as a sign of respect for those people who are around me. I have my child wear a mask in case my child is asymptomatic and he might not spread it to anybody else. If we all wore masks, we can contain this virus, right? The CDC has stated on repeated occasions that if we could all just wear masks in public as appropriate, we could get this under control in 4 to 6 weeks. So that face mask is our best bet right now, as well as hand hygiene. So with face masks, the governor has put out an order, the state health department has put out a public safety order, and Granite School District will comply with that public safety order, because that's the only way we can open up. And we want to open up, we want to service your students. That's our goal, that's what we want, is we want your students to be with us, because we know your students, we know how to help them, and we want to help them. So we just ask for your cooperation so we can stay open. We don't have to close. We don't have to go back to solely online learning, because that was a struggle for all of us. It wasn't awesome, but we know that it's a need. And we also know that it's, for some students, it actually did work well, right? And it is an option, and we still have that on the table for a lot of us. So again, that face mask is what we're going to use as that first kind of baseline foundational mitigating practice. Now, the governor's order has allowed for some exemptions to wearing face masks. And there are really only 2. There's one, there's exemption because of disability related to IEP or 504s, or there's a medical exemption because of a medical condition. So those are the only 2 exemptions that really do exist. The medical exemption really applies to the gross majority of our students. So if a student has a medical condition that where a mask will limit their breathing or impact them through hypoxia or anything else, that's where that exemption would come into place. And the way that exemption happens is first you go to the principal. The principal will kind of talk you through what is needed for that exemption. And then that principal at that time, after talking you through some talking points and kind of sorting through, you know, is it really a medical exemption? Is it a personal belief thing, or is it just an I don't wanna, right? And once we've kind of sorted through that, then they'll send you to the right person, and then we'll get a release of information from you. You'll sign a release of information just like we do when we're developing healthcare plans or anything like that, right? If my student has a heart condition and can't go out to recess for whatever reason or can't participate in these activities, we always contact the doctor, and the doctor certifies, yes, that's exactly how it is. It's the same thing with a medical exemption. We will fax that exemption form to the doctor. We're not requesting any information, okay? We're not asking them.
Like Dr. Day just said, we don't request additional information from medical professionals. We just send over the form and ask them to verify. We will also ask the medical professionals for recommendations that they might have of alternative solution for a student who can't wear a mask due to medical reason. We have some students who could fall under other mask exemption. He mentioned the medical one. The other one that we're referring to is IEP or 504 exemption. This is typically for students with more severe disabilities, have an extensive history of being served in special education, and we just know that they are not going to be able to wear a mask all day. Our governor recognized these students and the individuals in a couple of his press conferences in his language. An example would be a student with autism who has some severe sensory issues. Let's say that sensory is a big issue for them, and they struggle with tags and shirts or certain types of fabrics. Wearing a mask over your face all day might be extremely challenging for them. And in that case, we would have a meeting, and we would complete a form. Oh, Dr. Day's back. We would complete a form called the IEP or 504 exemption. And in there, we would list a plan for that student, some accommodations or a plan. Part of that plan would be to teach tolerance or build tolerance, and talk about how that student's gonna function in school. So it might be something, an example could be this student could wear the mask for 10 minutes at a time. There might be a positive reinforcement structure built in where when they do wear that mask, they earn points or something of that nature is desirable to them. Part of that plan might also be to limit exposure to other individuals in the school. So if we have a student, again, I'll just create an example, a student who's in a special class who has an IEP or 504 exemption from wearing a mask. And let's say that they typically went and joined a general ed class for a hands-on science activity or a music class. Well, this might restrict their ability to go join the ed class. Or we might say, hey, we know that your limit is 10 to 15 minutes with a mask. Let's go into that general population for 10 to 15 minutes with the mask on, and when it gets to a point that you just can't wear the mask, then we'll step out. And that would be being sensitive and respectful of all the other students in the school. So those are the two types of exemptions. We invite parents to work with your school. If you truly feel like your student needs one of those two exemptions, you're welcome to speak to your school administrator or the special education teacher that you're familiar with at the school there. And as with everything else, we'll say if you have questions or problems, you can contact our department and we'll steer you in the right direction. Dr. Day, do you want to pick back up?
Sounds like you've got it all covered.
Oh, let me add one more thing. Sorry, that's along these lines. I invited you to talk and then I decided I still want to talk. One thing that's come up, or a question we had that was given to us through the parent set, was about face shields. Is that an appropriate alternative for someone who struggles with sensory issues and wearing a mask? And the answer is that the face shield's not as safe. Research has shown that the mask that's tied around your nose and chin is safer, So that would be the preference. Now, we do allow for a face shield for specific reasons or purposes. That could be part of the student's plan. Maybe they're wearing a mask for a small portion of the day, maybe a face shield for a portion of the day. And teachers, and I know the question was specific to speech, teachers can wear a face shield if it is necessary for instruction. So if I were the speech teacher and needed to teach an articulation skill to the student, they needed to see my mouth moving, I could put on a face shield. That would be appropriate for a small moment, that small instance of instructional necessity. And a student could do the same thing. They may put on a face shield for the short period of time when the speech language pathologist needs to see their mouth and the placement of the tongue.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on now and talk about some of the mitigating practices we've got, and I'll have Sheri. I'll scoot over and let Sheri kind of talk about some of the things that we're putting in place in schools to really mitigate the spread and transmission of this virus. That it will help keep our students and our staff members safe, because we don't want staff members infected, because if they're gone, they're not instructing kids. And we don't want kids affected because they're not in front of getting that instruction. So I'm just going to slide over now and let Sheri talk a little bit about some of those mitigating practices.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce. So I think the main thing, the most important thing is if your child is feeling ill, to keep them home. If they have any of those symptoms, it's really important just to protect them as well as others, teachers and students. Just so you're aware, the district is installing some hospital-grade filters. Face masks will be provided to students and staff. There could be some potential temperature checks on specific scenarios where we want to make sure that we're keeping kids safe and students safe. Hand sanitizer is going to be available. We also are going to be providing additional gloves that to our classrooms where appropriate. Teachers will use a spray bottle to disinfect their classroom or areas within there. So maybe manipulatives, some seating, some work areas. We've also asked teachers to develop some routines on hygiene and sanitation procedures within their classroom. We've also asked teachers not to share manipulatives with students unless the students have been washing hands frequently or sanitizing. And we do have some procedures set in place for riding the bus as well. So some of those items are that the students and the bus drivers will be wearing face coverings, just a mask. Buses are going to be sanitized every drop off. And then we have hand sanitizers that are going to be, or dispensers that will be provided to every bus. There will be assigned seating, and going to be encouraging social distancing at the bus stop as well. So Dr. Bryce is going to take over.
Hi, I'm back again. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about quarantining now, because that's a question that we get quite frequently. We are going to quarantining can look a lot of different ways, and the reasons for quarantining can look a lot of different ways. And exposure, there are lots of different levels of exposure. There's direct exposure, there is secondary exposure, there's tertiary exposure, all these things that I don't know a lot about because I'm not a medical doctor. But when it comes to quarantining, we really look at who has had that close and direct exposure. Those are the individuals who are going to be quarantined. So we've asked teachers to assign seats, not rotate seats around, those kinds of things, so that we can know who is sitting closest to whom, so that event that we're teaching and there's exposure, or somebody comes, they're asymptomatic, and then they find out they were exposed to somebody, and then they go in and they get tested, and oh, they're positive. Nobody knew they were positive, but now they're positive. Okay, so Bryce is in the class, he's been tested positive. Well, we know who Bryce has been sitting by, both in his gen ed class and in his our setting. So those individuals have been within 6 feet of that student who've been in 6 feet of Bryce for more than 15 minutes, that's considered a direct exposure, a credible exposure. And those individuals would be asked to quarantine and be tested. Now, in the event that a teacher were to be quarantined, will the whole class be quarantined? Not necessarily. It depends on how they interacted with the kids. We're asking teachers to really limit how they interact with kids, which is going to be really hard because being a good teacher means you're in there with your kids, in close quarters, talking to them, listening to them, interacting with them, emoting with them. That really is what is required to be a good teacher. Which means instruction might look a little bit different this year. But if a teacher were to have an exposure and be put on quarantine, we'd be a sub into the class. That teacher, if they're asymptomatic, will probably still be working and preparing lesson plans and making sure, and maybe even interacting in a virtual way, kind of like this, with their class, so that they can still teach, they can still deliver high quality instruction, they can still kind of brandish and develop those relationships and work towards those IEP goals. Now, if a student goes on quarantine because a student's had a credible exposure, we again want to do all we can to keep that student still accessing their curriculum for gen ed as well as for special ed, which means we are really trying to deploy a bunch of technology so that if there were a credible exposure, a student is going on quarantine, we would ask that a parent come, if they have one, if they don't have one, like a Chromebook, a laptop or something like that, come and pick one up at the school, or we can have it dropped off or something like that, where we can keep everybody safe, we can deliver that technology, and then student can continue via, a virtual model. So that student, even though they're quarantining, can still access their schooling, they can still access their resource or speech services or whatever. Now, of course, that's problematic. I don't think that's anybody's ideal way of accessing education, but in these very uncertain times, it's kind of the best we do. But we still want to provide services. We still want to provide everything we can. Now, it might look a little bit different, right? If Bryce is a resource student who has reading goals and some speech goals, and Bryce goes on quarantine, so now Bryce is accessing online education with his gen ed teacher. My resource services might center around reading, but we might, through mutual agreement with parents, decide the best option is Bryce will work with the resource teacher to complete some of those reading assignments that he has virtually. Or the team might decide, you know what, I think it's best that Bryce continue to receive phonics instruction or whatever. Okay, then that's what we'll do. And what we're trying to do now is if we shift to kind of a virtual model, we want to make sure that we, as a team, parents and school, work together to make sure that we can deliver the instruction that the student needs to make the most of the virtual experience or the distance experience, whatever that looks like, because it might be packets as well. So that's kind of where we're at with quarantining. Let's move on and talk a little bit about face-to-face instruction and how that's going to look differently this year than it will in the past. So of course, we all know everybody's going to be wearing a mask. The teachers are going to be wearing masks unless they actually have to wear a face shield, and then they'll take their mask off, wear the face shield, and then put the mask back on. We are going to be, to the extent maximum possible, socially distancing kids. That means that at lunchtime, we'll be sitting kids staggered on tables across from each other and over the side, so we can maximize our physical distancing. I don't know if any of you saw the videos that Ben Horsley has been posting, but a couple of those shows exactly like lunch will look like for those kids. We're also going to, the teachers are assigning, as I talked about before, they're going to be assigning seats. So some teachers haven't assigned seats in the past, and they will now, so that we again see who that student has been exposed to. There's going to be a lot more cleaning. So we've, the district has invested in some engineered water generators. So we're shipping out engineered water, which kills the virus by breaking down the outer layer of the virus. And then once the outer layer is gone, The water actually is electrolyzed, so there's a current, and that current goes in and destroys the virus. And this engineered water is good. We can spray it, we can wipe it down with a rag. It can use to work for up to, I think, 48 hours. So once a rag, we don't have to worry about contamination on a rag, because once the rag's been sprayed, it will continue to be sanitary for up to 48 hours. So, and this engineered water is such that you can, a student could drink it if they wanted to. Not that we're everybody does that, but it is, it is pretty safe. So that will be available. And teachers will be asking kids to spray down tables, and we'll be teaching, as Sheri talked about earlier, teaching those hygiene practices. So before, where we might have taught some social skills and getting along with friends and stuff like that, we're still going to be teaching them, but maybe not as extensively as we have in the past. Now we're going to incorporate, what does proper hygiene look like? What does it look like in the days of COVID-19 to have friends? How can I socially distance and not, share germs, those kinds of things. We're also, obviously, we've all heard that now we're no longer going to be attending schools on Fridays. And we address that and why is needed. We are now asking teachers to do both modalities. So teach face-to-face and teach online learning. So if you have selected online learning for your student, delivering that online instruction does take preparation time. It takes time to review what's been turned in. It takes time to create presentations and videos and things that we're going to send out to you. And so those teachers need some preparation time, as well as, delivering face-to-face instruction. Now, to a certain extent, if I have a group of 5 kids getting like phonics instruction from me, and 1 or even 2 of those kids go distance learning, I still have to hold that group, right? So that time that is spent teaching that group is the same. I could have been more efficient if the kid was face-to-face with me, but now that kid is not. I still have to spend that same amount of time during the instructional day instructing students. It doesn't really cut down just because I have 2 or 3 or 5 less students. It doesn't necessarily cut down on my instruction time. So now I've got 5 students over here doing distance learning, and I've got the ones who are in front of me. I've now got to create something separate for these 5 kids, or these 10 kids, or these 15 kids. And because of the individualized nature of the IEP, I can't just create one thing and kind of blast it out. Not to mention the fact that they might be in kindergarten, or they might be in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, or 4th, or 5th grade, right? So now I have different layers of doing that. And we might have spoken and agreed that maybe the best is for me as the resource teacher to support student accessing some of their gen ed stuff via Canvas or Google Classroom. And so I need that time to be able to service those online students. It's really unreasonable to expect a teacher to teach all day and then all night to work to educate those kids and pay them the same. And unfortunately, we are in a budget and we haven't been given extra funds so that we can, extend teachers. And even if we could just designate just solely online teachers, we're in a teacher shortage. We can't even hire them. Even if they were out there, we can't hire them and pull them in. And so our best bet right now is to allow you to access the same teacher your students always access and knows your student best through an online model. Now, just because Fridays, your student will not be attending face-to-face on Friday does not mean they won't be getting service time through their IEP, or that they won't be assigned something from their gen ed teacher. We still expect that some distance learning happen for all students on that day as well. So the teacher will be delivering that online instruction or distance instruction, whatever that looks like, for every student, as well as preparing and delivering distance learning to students who have selected it. So it's going to be different for us, and you know what? We're going to make mistakes. We've never done this before, and we're just asking that as we go down kind of the road of this kind of face-to-face instruction, distance learning, hybrid model thing, that you're patient with us, and that you help us through the mistakes that we are inevitably going to make. And of course, the only way we learn is through those mistakes. So with that, that's all I have to say about kind of the face-to-face learning. I'm going to ask Kyle now to talk about what distance learning is going to look like kind of from here on out.
Thanks. As we reviewed some of the questions that came in and categorized them, one of the biggest ones was, of course, distance learning. And we want to make sure that you know that all students, whether it's a student with IEP or not, have the option of choosing distance learning or face-to-face instruction. That modality choice that's been given to parents applies the same to students with disabilities as it does to their typically performing students. So if you select distance learning for your child with an IEP, then that would trigger the team at the school, and the teacher would take the lead on this to contact the parents and work to create what we call the IEP distance learning plan. It's important to note that this plan does not replace the IEP. This is a plan to document and list out and discuss and to mutually agree upon how we're going to execute the services and provide the instruction as outlined in the IEP in a distance world. As you know, IEPs have been written for how many years and under the assumption that students would be in school. So there are certain services and certain things that we just can't do exactly the same way as students not in the building. That's why we want to get together and write these plans called a IEP Service Distance Learning Plan. If you need to speak to your school about it, now you know what it's called. In that plan, you'll be prioritizing targets. Those are kind of elements of the IEP goals that were already written. So we're not going to write new goals. We're going to keep the IEP goals that exist, and we're going to prioritize targets or sub-skills we're going to work on, and we're going to talk about how to work on those. Now, in that plan, you as parents will weigh in and the team will discuss what will be best for the students. So if you have selected distance learning and your child's going to stay home, that's great, that's your choice. But you might feel very strongly and the team might feel strongly that there are certain pieces that just can't be performed through distance. And so you could agree upon and document in that plan that the student would come to the school for some amount of their face-to-face instruction. I'm going to give an example again, one that I think might be common. A student who's staying home for distance learning, but their parents recognize that speech instruction over distance learning is limited on its effectiveness. It can be done, but it's not great. So they might agree upon coming into the school for their either one-on-one or small group speech instruction just for that. And that's something that can be done in that distance learning plan. So you do have that option. I should say that the team has that option. The teacher and parents feel like that's the best thing for the student to create sort of a hybrid plan. That's something that is unique to students with disabilities because we want to ensure that they're getting specialized instruction, they're getting what they need, and so it looks a little bit different than the general education students who are asked to pick one or the other, distant face-to-face, and to stick with that for a period of time. It's a little bit different. So the distance learning, if you select that, it should occur and will occur Monday through Friday. There was a question that came in or some confusion that now that there's not face-to-face school on Friday, does that mean that's the only day of distance learning? And no, teachers will provide learning experiences, online activities, packets, whatever you decide and agree on for the students who are doing distance learning home Monday through Friday. It's the face-to-face students who will be coming to school Monday through Thursday and then doing distance on Friday so they can continue to learn there. When it comes to distance learning, you might be asked, surprise, surprise, those of you who have been in special ed know there's some paperwork. So creating that plan is one thing. It would be written down so that it's a record that parents have and the school has to be written down. Another one that you may be asked and should know about is that if we're going to exchange confidential information over email, let's say that you prefer to stay in your home and you don't want to come to the school for an IEP meeting or something, that's fine, we can do that. But to send you a copy of that IEP to review beforehand or one that's finished after the meeting, we would need your permission to send that through email because it is a confidential document. You may be asked if you want to give your permission and want to sign a form for consent to work in a small group. So let's say there's 2 or 3 students at a school that a teacher has that are working on the same goals and targets. They may be able to run a small group over Google Meet or Zoom. In order to do that, and in order to not violate students' privacy and confidentiality, we would ask those parents to grant permission to do that. Really what it does is it broadcasts to anyone who happens to be in that house that these children do have disabilities and are served in special ed. So you might see that form also. You might see a form inviting you to extend the evaluation timeline. If your student's evaluation is coming up, but you really are not feeling comfortable bringing them into the school for the evaluation, again, that's fine. We'll work with you, but we might need to extend the timeline. So there are some forms that your teachers, your students' teachers might be talking to you about. And I think that's good for you to know what those are, so you can just look forward to those. As you're creating those plans, I just want to reiterate that it's important that it's a collaborative decision between parents and school, coming up with the best thing for the student and the best modality and way to provide that. And doing that in a way that prioritizes what's most important for the student, creating a plan, and considering, if necessary, a hybrid learning opportunity where the majority of their learning could be at home, but maybe some of it's done there at the school. If you have any additional questions about the plans, again, feel free to reach out to your school or to any of us.
I was at a distance learning planning meeting yesterday and saw one of those distance learning plans, and it was awesome. It's very detailed, very articulate, and it goes hand in hand with the IEP. So I was super impressed, and I feel it's going to be great moving forward with our distant learners because I saw one of those plans and it was top notch.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. I've been out to, just sat in one meeting so far at a school where we started the distance learning plan, and it was a good experience because it is kind of laid out for step by step, and everyone agrees on what they want. And I'm glad your experience was good too, Cynthia. Thank you.
Well, what I loved about it is, again, it worked perfectly in harmony with the IEP. So like you said, it's not replacing the IEP, it's not changing anything, it's like complementing everything that's on the IEP.
Yeah, and that way, as soon as things are in a position where families are comfortable bringing their kids back to school, not rewriting the IEP again. The IEP that existed before, we're ready, and we'll start with that plan as soon as they come back into school. Thank you.
Okay. So hopefully we've answered a bunch of your questions. We only have a few minutes left. But there were some other questions we got that I don't know that we've addressed kind of through this format. So I want to talk about them, for you because it's important. You ask the questions, let's answer them. We got a question about, will grading be more lenient for students during this crisis? Some who will be doing virtual learning out of necessity really struggle to keep up their grades. And the answer is, it's really a team decision, right? What that looks like, at least when it comes to IEP-related grading, that's really a team decision. I would anticipate that we're going to be more lenient, right? Because we know that for a lot of our kids, this distance learning is not ideal. And because it's not ideal, we're going to have to be a little bit more lenient. When it comes to what that would look like in a gen ed setting, I would also anticipate it's going to be a little bit more lenient as well, though I can't really speak to that. And that's a question I would probably put forward to your classroom teacher, both your gen ed classroom teacher and your special education teacher. We have a question about how will students' mental health be addressed in person and online? We have been working with the University of Utah through our BURST program, and they have created a bunch of online training modules for teachers and for students and for families to address kind of the stress that surrounds COVID-19, not being able to go out, not being able to see our friends, not being able to go to school and those kinds of things. So our schools will be utilizing those modules as well. And our school social workers, school psychologists have been working to identify which students need teletherapy. So if a student is online and has in their IEP or outside of kind of the special ed process has counseling, we can still provide that. Because we feel that's vitally important, especially during these times. We're so uncertain and so different that the kids' social emotional learning needs are still met. So our social workers and school psychologists are all over it. So I would anticipate if that is a service that you are receiving or have received in the past, that you would be in contact with a school social worker or a psychologist. And if you haven't, by all means contact and say, what's this going to look like? It'll probably be similar to, if any of you did any of those teletherapy that we did in the spring, it'll look probably a little bit similar, though I think we've learned a lot through that process, and hopefully it'll be a bit more effective and efficient. Will we be informed that a teacher, student, or parent tests positive, even if they don't think it's community spread? So the answer to that is it's a clear and definite maybe. So so if a teacher tests positive that interacts with your teacher, with your student, you would receive, as part of contact tracing, right? You'd receive a message that your student has come in contact with somebody who is positive with who's tested positive for COVID-19, or another student, right? You would be contacted through the health department, and that would be made known. But just like you wouldn't want of your student, right? They're not going to say, well, Bryce tested positive, so you need to get tested. They're not going to do that. They're not going to out your student either. But what will happen is they'll say a student or a teacher who your child has had close contact with has tested positive. You need to quarantine, and you just need to follow the guidelines that the health department lays out for you. And when they do contact tracing, they're very direct, they're very clear with what they want. They're usually pretty compassionate as well, the contact tracers are. What kind of things can the school do or offer to have a ADHD child staying on track when it comes to learning through an online or distance learning model when parents have to work? That is a good question, and again, it depends, right? And I think it goes back to kind of what Kyle was talking about earlier, that back and forth communication with the classroom teacher or the special ed teacher. What works best for your student to keep your student kind of going during independent work? What does that look like? And maybe when we're going, this is a struggle that is likely to happen. When we have that distance learning plan meeting, let's bring that up, because it might be best that the teacher do a Google Meet or a Zoom meeting like this, right? Where it's an actual interaction versus asynchronous learning where they're just posting something and we're watching it or whatever. And that I think is, that's probably the only answer I really got for you. Sorry about that, but really it's making sure that you schedule it with the team. And don't be afraid to push some of that learning into time when parents are home, so that you can supervise and you can help the student. Sometimes I think it is realistic to expect a student who struggles with attention to do stuff independent like that. Now, maybe Cynthia can speak to this a little bit, or Kyle. Part of the very beginning part of our distance learning plan that we try to lay out is kind of like, how is the student able to access distance learning? Can they pay attention? How long can they pay attention for? Because that's going to drive how we build kind of this distance learning plan. Because if it's unreasonable for Sheri to attend for more than 5 or 6 minutes, then maybe the only interactions we have are 5 or 6 minutes, and we break them up. Or I post little videos that are only 5 minutes long, those kinds of things. That way we're not going beyond what is reasonable for that student. And that's really what we want, is we want to make sure that what is being delivered is reasonable for your student. Sorry, I got my papers. We did have a question about what if a child will not or cannot wear a mask on the bus? Will he or she still be able to ride the bus? And do I need to drive them to school? Again, it depends, right? Like our severely impaired students who might be attending Hartvickson, we're going to address their wearing a mask differently than we would if I'm just a student who accesses gen ed and I just go to my local neighborhood school, be it Upland Terrace or Oak Ridge or whatever. If my child rides a gen ed bus, the expectation is they will wear a mask. If they cannot wear a mask or refuse to wear a mask on the bus, they will not be allowed on the bus. And it would be the best option for you to drive them. Now, we're always going to encourage students to wear a mask. And if they show up to a bus stop with a mask, our bus drivers will have masks for them. So that's not even going to be an issue. It's just a matter of, are we going to get them on the bus? Now, are we going to turn around and drop them off if they take their mask off? We're not. We're going to deliver them safely to school. But that might also mean you have a conversation with the building administrator. Now, if I have a student who's severely impaired and driving a special ed bus, we're going to address that a little bit differently, right? Like if I've gone through that process that Kyle's outlined, and we've got an IEP exemption. Now remember, not wearing a mask is never really an option. But maybe my child can only tolerate wearing a mask for a short duration of time. Then we're going to try that on the bus when we're in close contact, right? That might be the time that we as a team decide that's the best option for that. We're going to put that mask on, get the kid on the bus, and see how long we can get on. And maybe we can start building tolerance towards getting the mask on the entire ride towards school. But again, we're going to take these on case-by-case basis in order to kind of best meet your students' needs. I think that's all the questions we had. If you have more questions for us that we didn't address, I'm sure there are a myriad of questions that we didn't address. Please reach out to us here at Special Ed Department, reach out to the school, reach out to your teacher, reach out to Cynthia. She's been amazingly helpful, and I've had lots of conversations as we've gone through this whole process with Cynthia. So she can help you. And if she doesn't know the answer, she knows exactly to send you to find the answer. Because we want to be as helpful as we can during these times, and they're scary. We're scared, you're scared, the kids are scared. But this is such a great opportunity also for us to show our students what it's like in a time of stress, to keep our cool, to follow through when things are hard. Not wearing a mask is not comfortable for anybody. None of us like it. Like, I don't know anybody's like, yeah, I'll wear a mask, right? It's not really comfortable for anybody, but we do it, and we do it out of respect for everybody else. And this is a great opportunity for us to kind of build that communal compassion for our society and everybody around us. So that's all we've got. Do you have anything else for us, Cynthia?
No, just again, follow up what he just said and what I said at the beginning. If you have questions, call me. Again, my direct line is 801-833-3825. That is my cell phone, so you can call me, text me anytime. You can email me if that's easier. That's Cynthia, CYNTHIA @utahparentscenter.org. I'm the Granite consultant, so I am here to serve all of you. So please let me know if you have any questions. And like you said, I probably won't know the answer right off, but we'll find the answer. And thank you again, Dr. Bryce, Sheri, and Kyle for answering these questions for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Great day. Thank you.